Welcome back, guys, to the Bear and Scully podcast with me, Sean Scullion, aka Scully, Owen Mallon, aka The Bear, Aidan, the face for radio behind the scenes, and today we are joined. I did mess it up.
Oh my
God! Mess it up.
Sabrina Oprey.
What's going on?
I know what
And we're not even redoing this, Sean. We're just showing people that you aren't always the rock star you were at the weekend up on the stage. Sometimes you're a wee bit real.
Look,
Yeah.
it's been a long time since we've done the pod.
It has, because we were getting ready for a live show, so we weren't recording. But Sabrina, thank you very much for coming over.
Welcome.
That's my part. Sabrina, welcome to the show.
No, but all joking aside, thank you very much for coming over, Sabrina. Look, listen, this is the thing. You've sent us over some of your life. For the small paragraphs that we got, there's a lot of things that have happened in your life. But before we get into this, and it is important we let people know this, there's very traumatic things. We have murder, we have suicide, we have loss, we have depression. There is a lot of very serious things. But what I always like to do before we get into the more serious side of it is find out who our guest is and where they grew up and what makes them them. So take it away, Sabrina.
So my name's Sabrina Dunboven. I'm known Oprey in the Belfast area. I grew up in Trimbrick with 7 siblings and a mum. I left Belfast when I was 22. I took my little girl away. She was 1.5. I felt at that point in my life, after the trauma that I'd been through, it was time to escape and move on. And we moved down. We've been there for 24 years.
Well, that was a good podcast now. That was the brief outline. So you grew up in Trimbrick. And 7 siblings?
There's 7 of us, 7 girls. Yeah. I'm one of 7.
7 girls?
Yeah.
No boys?
No boys.
Eh?
Well, I do have two half brothers, but
okay.
my mum had 7 children, all girls.
Busy house.
Very busy. And I'm the second oldest, so as you can imagine.
So what was that like growing up in a house with 7 other...
It was very difficult, very hard, because there was a lot of poverty, a lot of struggling around. Growing up in the 80s, there was not much money and there was a war going on, so yeah, it was hard. And being the second sibling out of all the girls, you became a mum quite young because you were helping your own mum help these little siblings below you. We grew up with a father who was very abusive. A lot of domestic violence, a lot of told me to be silent on things that had happened. And later on in your life, when you become quite open to what happened back then in Trimbrick, these things should never have happened around us as children. No child should ever have to experience what we experienced as children growing up, what was done on my mum, but it happened. Mm-hmm.
And what sort of relationship then did you have with your father from?
We did always try and hang on to a relationship with my dad, because every child wants a father figure, don't they? But it took me till I was in adulthood to realise the abuse that went on at home and the things that was put upon my mum and what we were allowed to watch should never have happened, because I strongly believe the domestic violence was the start of my journey in my life, and which didn't go off very well. And it didn't go off for the older siblings because they've all struggled themselves with their own mental health because of the replay of the abuse that went on at home.
Was your father ever physical with the girls?
I can never recall being hit, but I think more mentally. There's a few occasions that I'd like to talk about that happened that I quite have a lot of trauma around. And I like to express and I like to be vocal about it because it's happened and it was told that I would never discuss it amongst other people. And that goes back to when I was probably 10. And I was attacked on a field, not where my mum lives, past the field every time I'm home. And I went to a little disco lesson one night, and my mum was having one of the younger ones, I think, and I went to this disco lesson, and I was coming back across the field, and there was three other friends with me, and we were approached by 4 people with bikes and had masks on. My 3 friends got away. Unfortunately, I didn't. I tripped because I was running that fast because there was no path and that was just a field. I was pushed to the floor. And I knew at that point, at this stage, something's going to happen to me here. So I screamed and screamed and screamed. There was a club, a bar across the way. And for some reason, I was saved by this man and woman because they heard the screams of me on the field. At this point, my pants had been removed. But this fella and girl did save me. The boys, which I know one of them who they were, and it's never been brought to a conviction or nothing because nothing did happen, but I was made to believe at that point, don't talk about that. Don't tell your mum. Keep that quiet. So all my life I had to carry that. They brought me home, and when I got home, he was there and he just says, go to your room. So I just went to my room. And it was only when I had a breakdown that it came out, that I expressed to my mum, like, this is what happened. And she was like, my Sabrina's hallucinating, she's on all that medication, she's saying all these things. And it was my older sister said, Mum, that happened to her. And she was absolutely heartbroken. She said, like, all that time, all this pain we're in, and you're now grieving and unwell. And it was when it came out, what happened.
And did your father force you to
I wasn't allowed to talk about it. I wasn't allowed. And there was another few things that happened at home. And sometimes I think back on these things in my life, now at the point I am in my life, and I think, was that my life? Was I saying my life then is what it would have been later on in my adulthood? Because things that happened then really happened. Like, I wasn't raped or nothing later on in life, but there was a lot of things, other things went on in my life that I've learned because of the shame, and I've learned to say that these things have happened and I can't bring that back for myself. But we were told to hide a lot of secrets around my mum. But we did because we always thought if we told her, he would beat her. So another incident it's so clear in my mind is that we were all kids, grew up in a community, there was nothing, we were very poor, and the grass was getting cut out on the front, and the man was only a young man, and he was like, can we all jump on the back of the wagon when you drive the grass cutter on? Can we all jump on top of the wagon? And he was like, yeah, get on. And so we were all jumping on and off, having a laugh in the field, and he said, look, I'm finished, just have to get off. And unfortunately, my little sister, my older sister, she's a year older than me, she didn't get off, but he didn't see her where she was, so she had sat behind where his chair would have been. And I kept on screaming, get off, get off, get off. But she just sat there. She just couldn't get off. So he drove off the field, and where you go up the Bellstee Road through Poglass, it's quite a big road, bends, and he was quite speeding, and the wagon tipped. I didn't know she was in the back. So she came off the wagon, and a bus had pulled over, and a car behind was a family member, luckily, and he said to my dad, when he brought her in the car back home, there's been an accident, she was in an accident, she just fell off the back of the wagon. Just calm down, right? So
that's okay, take your time.
Drink. So he put her in the back room in the house, and I approached her. She was 11 when it happened, so I was about 10. And he went up, they brought her in, he put her in the room and just said, just keep this between us. And I was like, oh, okay. Again, this petrified little girl starting. It was within 5 minutes of me entering the room, I realised that she was dying. She was foaming at the mouth, her eyes were all rolling, and it looked like there was a lump. It was like, and I remember staring at it, and I just thought, she's dying. So I run across the field. I didn't go up the stairs to my father, and I run across the field to the priest, and I said, I need you to come, my sister's dying. So me and the priest flew across the field back to the house, and he gave her her last rites in the room, and it was only then that he came down and stood there, and I thought, like, your child's dying in this room and you're just standing there like it's nothing. And I thought I was 10 years of age. So she was rushed into the hospital where she was in intensive care for 3.5 months. She had fluid on the brain and a fractured skull. And I thought, if I didn't approach that, if I didn't go into that room to her, within 5 minutes, she would have died in that room. And he was totally oblivious to what was happening. So she was admitted to hospital. She has severe epilepsy now. She has really bad social anxiety, and when she's around people, it has to be quite limited. She's done so well in her life, and she's trained to be a counsellor, but she does have a lot of scar mentally and physically from the trauma that happened. Again, my mum had just been in hospital having a wee baby, and she was coming home and people were saying to her, your daughter's been in an accident, her arms broke, her legs broke. But she pulled up and was unaware that she was took to hospital because she was nearly dead. But again, it was all, just get on with it. Just that's it. There was no like I look at my children and I think, if my kids even hurt their leg or their arm, I am absolutely traumatised, thinking, like, do we need to go to the hospital? Or when I grew up as a child, it was...
There's no love there.
Nothing.
It's so cold. Like, and any wonder when you say that you think that that's your formative years? This is what you're being shown. And at the time, you think that's normal.
And that's what I did for a long time. I thought that was a normal life. And that was normal to hide things, not talk. There was another time on that field. That field's, God, it's a massive open field outside my mum's house. But obviously the suicide has happened in the family. That there was an occasion that I was mounting the kids. I think it was about 13. And my youngest out of the the second youngest, she went out to play on the field, and there was a goal post that had broke. And I can remember it was in the garden, and I can remember I went up the stairs, because Mum's house is like a townhouse, so the living room's up the stairs, and I can remember I was up the stairs, went into the living room and I looked, and she was hanging off the goal post. What she'd done was she climbed up the part that was broke, and there was an old swing that someone was singing. She tried to take the swing down, and an accidentally freak accident happened, only I'd seen it. I run across the field, and I put myself on this post, and I pushed her up, and I was screaming, please someone help us. And someone from the area that had seen me and came and got her cut down.
I had a similar story to that. We grew up in Coolnafrankie, and me and our two lads were playing down the park, and it was the monkey bars. You know, you climbed across the monkey bars. For whatever reason, it's not a memory of mine. It's a vivid memory.
Yeah.
But there was this thick rope, and the only way to describe it is it's like nearly like a belt. And there was this thick rope, and I don't know whether the guys put it around my neck or were we just playing or whatever it was, but for whatever reason, I was pushed off the height and I was hanging by my neck.
Yeah.
But the two young guys run away, left me there. And for whatever reason, some of the parents went and got my dad. My dad was a butcher at the time, and he lifted a meat cleaver, and he came running down, and he cut me down from the monkey bars, you know.
Yeah.
But I always mind, I had burn marks around my neck where I was trying to get it off, and like God knows how that would have been.
Yeah, exactly.
If my father hadn't come down and cut me down. Yeah.
And I always think about my second youngest sister. I always think, if I hadn't walked into that living room and seen you, you'd have been gone. And again, what child at the age of, like I always think a child from the age of, that I can remember. People say a child wouldn't know at the age of 3, a child wouldn't know at the age of 4. I can remember every single trauma and every single noise, every single beating that my mum received. They have never left me. The goalpost has never left me. My sister down in that back bedroom never left me. Me being attacked on that field never left me. But I was just made to just get on with it. But why should I be made to get on with it? Why was I not sat down as a child and said by my so-called father, look, we're going to get help, we're going to get you support, we're going to get these people that done this. But there was never stability there.
What, is your father still alive?
Yeah.
And I asked earlier about having a relationship, and I completely understand. And we don't judge, because some people, they change in later life, and people mend that. But there's so much early in your early years. Like, even now you're an adult, you have your own children, and you know you've so much life experience, and you know this isn't right. Do you still find a constant battle with what to say how you think, how your brain, your formative years was not right. That's not how it should be. Do you still battle with sometimes that demon that you're thinking like that was the way that was made you think, but you're like, no, this isn't right. This isn't the way.
I do. I've educated myself so much around it. And I believe now that everything that happened to us as children and to my mum should never have happened. I did struggle to understand the trauma and understand why I was the way I was, a young teenager. But what happened then was his fault. And the beatings my mum took were, you just, honestly, you wouldn't do it you wouldn't do it on your worst enemy, put it like that way. And again, me, the older sister, me, the middle sister, and then there was 4 older ones, and then there was the 3 little younger ones. And there was beatings that we were jumping on a grown man, biting him and pulling him and hitting him with cups to get him off my mother. And there was a beating this time he gave her, which took me a long, long time to accept that it happened, but deal with the trauma around it. Because he beat her one night, and this was the last beating he gave her, and we had got the kids up the stairs and we put them in I'll never forget it, in the top bedroom, and it's a room that triggers me a lot. We put them in the bedroom, and my older sibling at this point was on his back while my mum is in this tiny confined space in the hallway, and he's on her and he's just headbutting her and he's just headbutting her and he's just banging her head off the ground, and my sister was on his back, and I'd got me and my sister who's passed away, we got the kids into the room, and I ended up joining in it. And I ended up, there was a cup on the side of the floor, and I forget, a little white cup, and I got it, and I was bashing it on his face, and I was like, please leave her alone. So he flung us, and we went off, and he lifted her, and he got her by the head, and put his foot in her chest, and kicked her from the top stairs, and she went right through the bathroom wall. And our neighbour at this point came in, because the house was smashed to pieces, the kids were screaming, the blood was everywhere. And I can remember our neighbour coming in, he was always supported us and got us all into the house. And I can remember sitting in the living room, and I remember saying, my mum's dead, my mum's dead, my mum's dead, my mum's dead. And I got up and I left, same layout as my house, like the house in our house. And I got up and I heard a conversation, and I thought, she's alive, she's alive. And I remember opening the bathroom door, and my neighbour was bathing her in the bath. And she had you couldn't see her eyes, her head was all swollen, and the bath was just red with blood. And I remember my neighbour going, just wait out there. And I can remember standing thinking, oh my God, this has to be the last time, Mummy, this has to be the last time. And then the next morning we all went back into the house, and we all went up to our room, and I can remember me again waking up thinking, where is she, where is she? And I went down the stairs, and I can remember she was in the room with him, and he was sleeping. And I can remember opening the door, and I just stood there like, Mum? And she just went. And that was the day she left them. And she hasn't been back. So she's been free from the domestic abuse, and we were free.
What age were you at that stage?
I was 12 when he went.
You're 12.
Mm-hmm. And it had a massive effect on all our mental health, mostly the 4 older ones.
It's absolutely horrific just hearing that. Like, I don't know, I actually am lost for words. I don't understand how people can be like that, and how they can, and I'm not saying this like some fucking dickhead that's trying to, I just don't know how men can be like, or they're not men, like,
No.
but I don't know how there can be so much anger and evil in them.
Yeah.
And this is people that you're supposed to love and care for. Like,
My sister always said that. Like,
he's supposed to lay himself down to protect you,
protect us,
to give you the best start in life, give you love, attention, care. Like, obviously, mental health and you girls are going to struggle. It's all girls in this house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And my mum, I think my mum's 29 when he went, and I always remember got over. My mum was 29, and that was it.
You were still in that house,
yes,
you still get the
still
memories.
House, yeah, the house is still there. We all still go back and stay there. But where my mum's living room is, the bedroom that goes up the top is the room that always triggers me. I really struggle to stay in that room because my sister passed away. We lived in that room when I had my first child. That was our little house. We stayed in there together. But that room to me just brings back that night so clearly, and it just triggers me so much, and I just feel like I can't be in that room. Even at this age, it still triggers me. But my mum was 29 when he left, and again, the poverty, the struggle of us being abandoned, her being abandoned by her husband, she struggled as well, because I think back to her, my mum laid on the sofa for years, and when we used to go home from school, let's talk until the other day, but then she got really upset, and I said, we used to go home from school, Mum, I used to open the blind, she was still on that couch, and I think, how depressed must she have felt? Even though she was being abused, how hard was for her to then know, I'm on my own here with all these kids. And he never looked back. He never looked back. And she done it, and she's done us proud, but he never looked back to support us. She done it all on her own. And it was hard, but because we weren't easy children. We grew up in an area where poverty was bad, there was a war going on, things we shouldn't have seen as kids, but we all rebelled and thought we were hard, and then we got into the 90s and we all got into the rave scene, and she did struggle. But there's things that could have been so different as well.
Like, if your mum hadn't got rid of him at that time, she wouldn't be here.
No. She says to all her daughters, because I bring that beating up a lot because it was so horrific, and I say, tell her, like, what have you to stay up? My mum, she went, I knew that next day, if I don't leave him, he's going to kill me. He will kill me. And that wasn't just one beating, that was many, many of beatings. My mum was known for having black eyes, and she used to walk around with her kids looking at him to get money for us to feed us, and it wasn't just that one beating, there was multiple beatings, but that beating was one of the ones I remember very clearly because it was so horrific.
Have you had any relationship with your father since?
I did, because I lost my half-brother to suicide a few years back, and I've done loads of healing on myself, so I thought at that point, right, here's 2 children I'd lost to suicide. For my own self, I forgive him and I'll try and make a relationship, but that backfired. And I realised he's never going to be a dad. He's never going to be a granddad. He doesn't know my children. He's never even met my grandson. So I did build a relationship, and we did through our, I'd say, 18, 19 age group. We always used to go to the bar. This is our dad and all. But it was only later on in my life when I had that breakdown, I realised that was all wrong. That was wrong. And he has scarred us all still to this day for what he done on us.
He went on to another relationship, had more children.
Yeah. 2 sons.
And he's a 2 son. Like, I know a lot of the times there's people here, and it's hard for listeners to understand that the people, why would they want to? But even after all that, people still crave the love from their parent.
Yeah, of course.
Even after all that they do. So it's hard for people that have never experienced that or never been in it. And it's hard for me. Sometimes it's only through speaking to other people that I've realised this, that I would be like, why would you want to? And I haven't been there. I don't get it, but I do understand it now. Like, there was still a part of you that wanted his love, wanted, that we can change and this and that. But then when you get an understanding of exactly the spiral that you and your sister's lives were sent on, then you know that sometimes there's people they're just poisoned. They have to be cut out. They have to be kept away because they poison everything that's good. And there's no fixing in them. And that's why sometimes I say to people, for self-preservation and people like that, sometimes you have to say, it isn't me. There's nothing wrong. You've created all this, and all the things that you've pointed to your childhood, they all point back to one place, and it is that
100%.
So how did that affect you then, going through school, leaving school, and then, like, did you play out? Did you go mad? Did you?
Yeah, I turned into I'm not going to say I'm not a nice person. I just turned into a life that I thought, like, I rebelled a lot.
Were you angry?
Very. I grew up as a very angry person. A very aggressive person at times. Some of the behaviour, I look back and think, oh my God. But I was in a very touchy predicament of understanding myself, and I was just made to develop into this, just get on with it. You'll be all right. Do what you want. But in hindsight, mentally, it was destroying me inside. So I became this person that I look back at now, that was not me. But sadly, I developed into someone that I have had to deal with the shame. I have had to deal with the things that I know that were not right. But that is part of where I am in my life now and how I've got where I am.
It's completely understandable to know why, as a young girl, that you will get angry and think when you can't process emotion, when people can't process things that have happened to them, trauma, and you can outrun that for as many years as you want. That what happened to you at 10 years of age is absolutely horrific, and like that you may have thought you forgot about it, you may have thought you outrun it, but it's completely understandable. But what ways then, what were you doing? What was, this was in around your 17, 18 years of age?
So at 16, my older sister introduced me to the rave scene. She took me to my first rave.
Drugs?
Mum, yeah.
E-tabs?
Yeah.
It was the big thing back then, wasn't it?
It was. And at that point in our lives, when I done that, I felt love. I felt people loved me. People wanted to be around me. The life in a rave scene was just nothing would beat this life. And I found happiness. I found happiness, which when I look back now, was not happiness. But at that point in my life, the music, what we were doing, the clubbing, meeting new people, it was like this different big picture of what I was living with at home. So I felt like I found this, I'm bigger and I've grew up really quick, and in hindsight, really, it wasn't, and I would be absolutely mortified if I think that my kids, I don't know what, the one's 26, and I don't know whether, but I'm thinking, ooh. But yes, in the 80s, I found a lot of happiness. This is where I met my child's dad when I was 16.
And that's what you met your child, and
my oldest daughter's father, yeah.
Yeah, and what age were you then when you fell pregnant?
I fell pregnant with our first child when I was 17, and I lost the baby when it was 3 months. And then I fell pregnant again when I was 19, and I gave birth to a little girl.
And what was that like then, you know, going through that scene? Were you still with her? Well, obviously we were still.
Yeah, we were together for 4 years, and I felt he was my protector. I felt that he was only young himself, but I felt this big man, and it was like we just had a crazy 4 years of our lives, but I felt like he was always going to be there to help me, and I would never feel weak, or I would never feel scared, and he was there, and he was there, and we had such an amazing 4 years of our lives in the rave scene, like we did, and we I gave birth to our little girl in 1998. I was 4.5 months pregnant when I lost him. So
you had your first child, and then you were pregnant again. What happened?
On that night of him losing him, yeah. So we went for our scan the week before, and he was absolutely made up. He took his uncle with him. I was thinking, oh my God, well, who brings his uncle to his scan? His uncle standing there, he was like, oh my God, because she was their little head and on her arms. And we left the scan that day, and he went, let's go to town, let's leave the pram over, let's leave the cot over, let's go and buy a few little outfits. And he was absolutely booming with pride. He was so proud. And that was the week before. So on the week after, I'd gained a lot of weight, and I said to him, I don't want to go out. He was like, we're all going to go to exit 15. And I was like, I wasn't doing drugs or nothing, or drinking, because I was expecting our baby. So I just thought, well, I always wanted to be with him. I was like a leech. Where John had to be, I had to be. I was like a stalker. So on the Friday, he said to me, look, go and get yourself some clothes. Come along. I went, right, okay. Went into town. And I always remember walking through the city centre, and I heard, hey! And I turned around, and he was there, and he went, I'll pick you up at your mum's. And I was like, right, okay, blah, 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 be ready. And got ready, headed off to exit 15, driving along the motorway. Got there, and he went, I'm not going in. And I said, tell him why. And he went, have to go somewhere, but I'll be back to get you at 2:00. And I went, was quite upset, and I thought, but it was a group of us anyway, and I thought, right, okay. So I got into exit 15. I became very tired. I wasn't even drinking, I was drinking bottles of water. Everyone's up doing whatever, we were dancing, and at 10 to 2, I said to my friend, I'm going to go outside to see if he's there. I said, I want to go back home. I feel really, really tired. So as I went towards the turnstile, the doorman was screaming, get back in, get back in. There's a fight in the car park. Something just in my stomach, I just thought, he's in the car park. Is someone, a fight broke out? Or so next thing I heard, bang. This massive, massive bang. And I knew it was a gun. So at this point, the man's screaming, pushing everyone back in to the club. There's a gunman, there's a gunman. So I just run. I just run right through the club, right out by the stairs, right, and push the exit door and run. And as I run, everyone was screaming and screaming. And I heard another gunshot. And I just run to it. I could see people running this direction and people running towards the club. But in my gut, I knew. I just knew it was him. And as I got to him, he was just lying there on the road. I remember saying to him, John, please get up. And in my mind, I don't know what I was thinking. I thought he'd hurt him. He was just in a fight, or I thought someone had shot him in the leg. I just didn't know. And I became really manic at that point. Everyone was screaming and people were grabbing me, and I was just like, fucking leave me alone. I remember getting down on my knees, and his little friend beside him, sadly he's took his own life as well, and I never said to him, please get him up. Please get him up. And at this point, someone had phoned an ambulance, and the ambulance arrived, and I was screaming, please, please let me go with him, please. He can't be on his own, he can't be on his own. And I remember the ambulance man saying, someone remove her, please help us, girl. And it was like I was just sucked out of this reality, and I went into like this, like I could see people and I could hear, and I was like this echoing in my head, and I was thinking, what do you mean? What do you mean I can't go with him? And I just remember them just putting the white sheet over him, and he died. And then I had to travel home. But in that, getting to where we were in the car park, it was like I was walking on a cloud, and I could just see all this commotion and people crying, but I can remember just screaming, and I mean the screams that was coming out of my stomach. Because when the ambulance drove off, I thought, why have they not let me go with him? And then I just realised, and the scene it kicked in again, that they put the sheet over him and they put him on the back of the ambulance, and then I can remember just touching my belly and thinking, our baby, I'm having a baby. We're having a baby. He can't be dead. He can't be dead. We're having a baby. And we travelled back home, and I had to go to his mum's to tell his mum that he had died. And God love her, she just went, get in you and don't be so stupid. Where is he? And I went, he's dead. And I can remember sitting on her sofa, and she turned the fire on, she lit a ciggy, and she went, where is he, Sabrina? And she shouted her husband down, and I was like, he's dead. He's been shot dead. And the next thing the phone rang, it was the police saying they had to come to County Tyrone Hospital. There's been an incident. But he died on the scene.
I'm so sorry that what actually happened afterwards? What did, so when you went, you weren't aware that it had been shot at the time. I know you heard the thing, but so much stuff was happening.
Yeah, when we got into the car, I was screaming, what had happened, what's happened, because I heard the shots, but I just didn't, in hindsight, my brain was not functioning, my brain wasn't even, I just could see him there, and I actually went back to that spot a few years after that, just to try and rephrase in my own mind what I seen. And when I got, it wasn't a few years, it was a few months. But when we got in the car, I was like, where's he been shot? Did someone shoot him on the leg or something? Did he have this? And then someone said to me, no, he's been shot in the head. And even then, it didn't even register that he is dead. someone actually shot him in the head and sitting in his mum's house until his dad came back. I can remember sitting there when they said there was an incident. I was going, I knew it. He's not dead. And I was sitting there going, I knew he was shot somewhere else in his body. He's not dead. And his dad had to go and identify him. And I can remember when he came back from the hospital, we were all in the living room. Crowd had started gathering outside the house, and it was really, really busy. And I can remember his dad walking into the house and just walking up the stairs, and he was just screaming. And then it was then I realised he's dead.
I'm sorry, but there's that there, the night that happened, was he the only one that was killed?
Yeah. There was a fight that broke out in the car park.
What do you know what actually unfolded afterwards? Have you been told, or are you aware? But what happened that he didn't go in with you?
He just said to me that him and his mates were going somewhere else. And I am totally unaware where they were going. But he said, I'll be back to get you at 2:00. And sadly, that he's never got to tell me where he went because he was murdered.
And
but the fella that murdered him was in the club. He was in that club that night. And when we went through the first court hearing, the police were showing me photos, and I'm standing beside this fella all night in the club, and I didn't even know. And they said, but you're quite close to where he is. And I said, I don't know who he is. I've never seen that fella in my life. I know his name, but I've never seen him in person. But sadly, I was able to identify other people in the group that I knew from the Trimbrick area that were in his group, but I didn't know who he was.
So it was somebody from Belfast?
Yeah.
And exit 15's up off the exit 15 in Dungannon?
Yeah.
But when you were travelling up there and you were going there and he was convincing you to get ready and something wasn't right, that he wasn't going in, was there something he was aware that was unfolding? Was this something that happened between them?
I don't know. Because he didn't tell me till we got to the car park he wasn't coming in. And I was like, what? And he was like, I've got to go somewhere else. But when when it happened, me and his dad and his uncle went and watched the CCTV, and the police officer said to me, was your partner a fighter? And I was like, what do you mean? He said, was he a kickboxer? I went, no. Why? He said, because you see the fight breaking out in the car park, and John at the time was a hard man. He could handle himself. But then you hear him shouting to his girlfriend, get the shooter. She runs to the car and gets a gun.
Right. And the man was arrested?
No.
The person that killed him was never been arrested?
He's been arrested. He went to court say 3 years ago.
Not at the time?
No.
Nobody
He went on the run.
So, what you at the time you knew you'd been.
Everyone knows who he was,
and
yeah.
the police knew,
Mm-hmm.
and then he went on the run.
Mm-hmm. The two girls and the driver all got time. They got 3 years, but they couldn't be recharged again because they'd been charged in 1998.
They were charged in 1998,
and he was never charged. So he was only his mum and his family fought hard to get him, and they did. And he was extradited from Dublin, and he was took to court.
He was on the run in the south, and he was taken to court 3 years ago.
Yeah, the court hearings went on for a long time, but his mum and his family fought to get him extradited from Dublin, which took a long time, and they did, and it was in the High Court in Belfast.
And he was found guilty.
Yeah, of execution.
And how long did he receive?
22 years rape parole.
Was that the first time he committed?
He's always denied it. He's never admitted.
He's never admitted to it?
No. And because I was I was a key witness, I had to do a lot of interviews and give an image of what happened and where we were and what happened at that night in the club and why we were going there and whatever. And our daughter asked me, can I come back with you, Mum? And I was like, I don't know if I want you to be sitting in a court. And she said, but that's my dad. My dad was took away from me and I want to be there. I want to see him. So I was in the witness protection and she went along, and how strong that must have been for her, because she said I sat behind him the whole hearing And I just thought, I felt like just saying to him, why did you do that to my dad? Why did you think that that was okay to pull a gun out and shoot him? And the judge said that that night of the murder, he wanted to show he was boss. And because a young lad, had fought him, and this was an older man, he was in 47, John was 22, and he wanted to show to probably the people around who were watching it, I'm boss here, and shot him.
Was this a paramilitary thing?
No.
This was a personal grudge?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He tried to bring a lot of paramilitaries in until it was going to do with paramilitaries. Nothing to do with it at all.
Because if it was paramilitary related back then, the Good Friday Agreement was after that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't paramilitary. He tried to claim, because I don't know what type of thing he was in, but this was nothing to do with paramilitaries at all. And you can actually read back on the papers, because it was really highlighted over the papers when he got convicted, that the judge made him aware that you went out that night and you were in a fight and you made it clear that you wanted to show everyone in that car park who was the big man, and you shot him dead. We'd had to do impact letters, and I said to my daughter, the detectives want us to do impact letters, and she went, you do yours first, Mum, why not read yours? And then I had support of my older sister at that time to do my impact letter, because it was so emotional, and it was heartbreaking to see, actually look at the impact it had on my life. And I let my daughter read it, and she went, I've done mine. I'll never forget it. She went, I've done mine. And I went, what? She went, I've done mine. And I was like, okay. I couldn't even get down the third sentence of her impact letter. And I didn't realise that the impact that had on her, because I was so in my own trauma.
But you're robbed of your partner. She's robbed of her father. Over a stupid bravado, somebody's
fight. Over a fight. And even going through my pregnancy, the rest of the pregnancy, Rhea was born, John's mum was there and my mum, and I put myself into a lot of stress. I tried to manage at the delivery as much as I could, but I knew at the end that he's not here, and she was born non-responsive, and again she had to have adrenaline, she had to massage of the heart. They told John's mum and my mum to leave the room because she was not responding at all. And I can remember just looking across this room and just looking at this baby jet black, thinking, why me? Why me? And they worked on her for about 25 minutes, and we just heard this little cry, and I realised, oh, she's alive. She's alive. And she did struggle through her teenage part of her life in school, but she's turned her whole life around, and has a brilliant career, fantastic life. But there was a point in her life that I did have a lot of hard times with her.
It's so hard for me to get my head round that you're still only very young. What age were you when John was killed? He never got to hold his baby.
No, and that for a long period of my life was, she should have him there. He should be watching for her grow or cry or teasing, her first birthday or communion, all these things that a dad and mum want to do together was took away from her. And it wasn't until she was about 11, I think, and she was at his grave back in Ireland, and back in Belfast, I should say. And she rung me and she said to me, you told me my dad died because he was sick.
You've spent your life looking your dad to be there for you, and now you have your wee girl, and you just want her to have her dad there for her. It must have been very, very hard. It
was really hard, and I again became silent. I never told her he was murdered, because I thought, how do you sit down at a little girl and say your dad was murdered? So I kept it really quiet, and she went to the grave with his siblings, and his younger sister rang me and she went, Ray is really upset at the grave. And I was like, why? And she went, because it says on the grave murdered. And I totally did not. I didn't even think. And she was at that age, she could have asked me why. So she rang me and said, why did you tell me my daddy died? Because he was sick. And I asked her who was she with, and she said, my aunties. And I said, listen, I'll talk to you when you come back to Liverpool. I'm not going to discuss it over the phone. We'll talk when we get back. And she rebelled on me a bit, and I totally get why she rebelled, because again, I was made in my own mind to think, keep this silent until she's at the age that I'll tell her what actually happened. But she knew from a very young age.
I don't know if there's any right or wrong way in that. You're trying to protect her. You know, she's already a massive victim of what's happened, and you're trying to protect. But then the lie outgrows itself in the way that she's going to come of age where she's going to know, and you're going to have that conversation. Sometimes you kick the can down the road because it's easy. I don't know if there's any right way or wrong way in that. You know, you tell her earlier and she rebels because now she knows what's happened and there's anger or there's resentment for not saying. It's not easy. And plus now we're coming into the age where people can Google and they can check things.
Yeah.
So like things...
There wasn't even mobile phones back then, 1998. I think they only started coming out. The phones.
And you were in Liverpool.
No.
You had nobody. Was there any nervousness when she was going back to Belfast that somebody might say something?
I always worried about her growing up, and I always thought, like, what if she was ever went back to Belfast as an adult and went out one night and was in a club, and he appeared, or one of his family members appeared, and someone said, oh, that's his kid over there. And I always had that fear. And I always had a fear of, like, what if someone just told her out of the blue, which I hadn't told her. But she actually, because she went to the grave, it came out of her herself. No one had actually sat down and said, tell her what had happened.
Was the person that murdered John known to John?
I don't know if I don't think there was no like mates or nothing. I just knew because they were from the Belfast area. They knew their names, but there was no connection. And
then, is that when you decided to move away?
I met my husband. It was just before Rhea's second birthday, and I met my husband, and I was working in a cafe in the city centre, and he came in, and we just got talking, and we went on a date, and it was then after a few months of a relationship, he asked me, do I want to come to Liverpool to live? And I didn't just go to Liverpool just to get away from Belfast. I went because...
Nobody would have blamed you. I don't mean that Belfast, because I look... But
I know.
Let's face it, you didn't see any of the nice part of it.
And I can remember sitting in the inn shops with my sister, God love her, and I was sitting there, and I said, tell her what he had asked me, and she just proper busted out crying, and because she always supported me when John died, her and my older sister. And I remember saying, I might go. And she went, you're going to take Irie away from us? Oh. And I was like, I can't stay here. I can't stay here. And if this is a way for me to build a better life for me and her and get out of here, I'm going. And I remember going home and telling my mum, and mum was like, best thing I heard you ever say. And it
must have been hard for her because your daughter was growing up at home, wasn't it?
Yeah, me and her lived with my mum. And it was hard for all of them. My mum was, sobbing. But she said, if you've got an opportunity and it's going to save you, then go. It doesn't work, your house is always here. And I went, and I've been there for 24 years.
But you've had more trauma than just that.
Yeah.
So your younger sister, that she's the one below you?
She is the one below me, yeah, the third one.
And you've lost her?
Mm-hmm.
When did that happen?
The 8th of April 2003. It was 4 years after John was murdered. She took her own life.
Had she struggled with her mental health?
Yeah, and she struggled with our upbringing. She struggled with the abandonment of him, and she then followed into a relationship for 2.5 years of domestic violence and abuse, and she was gone within 2.5 years. She took her own life because of the abuse.
This is something we've touched on before on this podcast. History repeats itself. What you show your children is acceptable, they then deem acceptable. And what you were being shown was the normal.
Mm-hmm.
It has a toxic way of finding itself round again. And breaking that cycle, being that generational break in that is very hard. Young girls and boys growing up in domestically abusive houses are more common to get into a domestically abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Did you know that your sister
Yeah.
was going down?
I told her because I know who he was. And she struggled around my father. She struggled around not understanding why he wouldn't want all his daughters to love him, why he didn't want. She wrote a letter to him and she said to him, "You've got 6 daughters who will love you and will spoil you and will make so many memories of you." And he just didn't want to know. He just didn't want to know. But she, out of all us, I would say she was the one that struggled the most. But what kills me the most is that because I'd lost John, everyone was panicking around me, thinking, keep an eye on her, she's not well. And I had loads of support from my mum, loads of support from my older sister and our Stacy. And Stacy's the one that had this character, the big smile. And then she met him, and I said, "Tell her, Stacy, he's not a good person, you know. He is not a good person." And she, well, I found that out for myself. And she went into a 2.5-year relationship and received the same treatment my mum received off my dad. Probably worse.
And when you got the call, were you over in Liverpool?
Yeah. She came to live with us for 6 months because she took an overdose. He had given her a beating one night and she took an overdose, and then she must have panicked. So she phoned the city hospital and said, "I've took an overdose, I've had a beating of my partner." So she got away to the hospital and she said to the nurse, they gave her treatment, whatever. And she said to the little nurse in the city hospital, "Don't be ringing my mum." And the nurse then went above her and knew because the way she looked and because of the overdose, she had to step in and ring my mum. So my mum got her made her way to the hospital, and Stacy had no clothes because they put like a little gown on and stuff. Mum said, "Look, I'm going to go back to the house, get her some bits. Don't let anyone in." She was in a little side room, she said, "Don't let anyone in." The nurse went on a break and he entered the hospital and gave her a beating in the lift. She made her way out of the lift and made her way into the toilet because she told me this when she lived with me. And she was on a drip, and he then went into the toilet and smashed the door in a little tiny cubicle, and he broke her nose and fractured 2 big massive black eyes. And my mum rang me and said she needs to come to stay with you for a while. So she came and lived with me for, I think it was 4 or 6 months she stayed with us. Then she went back and he knew she was back and kicked my mum's door in and said she would be found in a wheelie bin.
Was he ever convicted of this?
No. My mum said Stacey had attempted a few times on her life. She attempted when she was 14. Again, I think it was due to the struggle of the mental health that went on at home. And then she took before she actually took her own life, she tried to hang herself in mum's garden, but she confided in my older sibling. And my older sibling said, "Why would you do that? Why would you do that on Mummy? Why would you do that on us?" And she, "I know, I'm scared, I don't know why I'd done it." And then 3 weeks that day, she done it. She finally done it.
What age was Stacy?
21. She said to my mum that morning on the Sunday, "He's going to kill me." And mum said, "Look, it'll be fine. I'll get it sorted. I'll go and see my brothers. We'll get it sorted. It'll be fine." And she was found on the Tuesday. So she went home to a little hostel she was in, and she done it then.
When your sister did your father show up to the funeral?
Yeah. He showed up. And he was crying, and my older sibling was sitting there now, and she said, "What's he doing here? What's he doing here?" And my poor wee mother thought that it was the right thing to say, "You can come into the house." And he came into the house and he just fell to the floor. I was like, "What have I done in this family?" And my mum just put her hand on his shoulder. She didn't even speak. And that only lasted a few weeks, and then he went again. Nothing changed. And what kills me the most is that it's mad because where Stacey's hostel was, I left home quite young, and I was allocated a first place in this hostel on the Falls Road, Rosemary House. I was the first person to enter it, brand new, everything new. And when Stacey ended her life, me and my older sibling, after the funeral, a few days went down. We said, "Can we just go down and see the room, just to go in and just sit there?" And it was my room. It was my room. And I always think, like, was that my life with the goalpost? Was that what was going to happen later on in my life? And I remember, I remember getting the phone call off my older sister, and she said, "Our Stacey's took an overdose again." And I can remember my two older ones were playing in the kitchen, and it was a house phone at this stage, and I went, What's she doing that for again? Oh, Mum, what the fucking hell is she doing that for? And she'll ring you back in 5 minutes. Mummy's ringing. I need to ring Mummy, see what's going on. So not even within 2 seconds, the phone rang, and I can remember this big scream. She's dead. She's dead. And I can remember throwing the phone, lifting the 2 kids up, and I run. I always feel like I just run. And I just run into the street, and I was screaming, "Somebody help me, please, someone help me." And no one helped me. No one came out. So I got back into the house, and I'm like, and the kids were screaming, and I was just like, I felt like I was back in 1998. I think everything was just doing that. And I felt like I was going to pass out. I thought, I'll ring my boss. So they flew round, and I phoned my husband to say, "You'll have to come home from work." And he arrived back home, and I couldn't even go to bed that night. I can remember just laying on our living room floor. I can't go up the stairs. I don't know if I was thinking back as a kid, and all this trauma was just flying at me. And I remember getting on the phone to my mum and I tell her, "What's she done, Mummy? What's she done? Please tell me." And Mum said, "I'll tell you when you arrive home." I said, "Please tell me what she has done, Mummy. Why is she dead?" And she said, "Just hung herself." And to hear that word was like something just stuck a knife right through my heart. She hung herself in the little room that was my room. And to think that she was there on her own for 11 hours, it was then my PTSD, which was like, oh my God, bad. And again, that's when my life just, I can't explain it. The pain of losing her.
You've obviously received help, or you've had understanding of your mental health to help you understand what the things that have happened in your life. What about your other sisters?
My other sisters, my older sister became quite recluse. She became quite mute. She just came away. Which I think is worse because she just buried. She just couldn't speak about her because, like, she was her best friend. Her and her we were all really close, but because she was the older sibling, she always looked out for all us. Even though I was the second one, we were like their aunties. We were like looking after all these little kids. She struggled with hers. She became quite mute and quite recluse at home. I became addicted to prescribed medication. I was hospitalised. On suicide watch for 6 weeks because I had a breakdown. I was took out of the house. My other sister became dependent on alcohol. She's now in recovery, 2 years. My other little sisters were babies, so what happened at home, they can't reflect on that, but they know the sadness around us. But regarding the suicide, the effect it had on them is, again, one left home, one was on the drink, two of them quite stayed at home with my mum. We all just quite distanced, or we all went different ways of grieving. And I would say the word suicide took me to be able to say it without the pain of 20 years. 20 years to understand it and understand why she done that.
You've had such a traumatic turbulent life, and then that was all happening, and you took ill yourself.
Yeah.
Were you? How did the addiction to prescribed medication? Did you start taking after that, or was this?
I remember going to the GP all the time, me and my husband, and I was just crying and all the flashbacks of my childhood. And I remember going to the opticians and saying, I've got a brain tumour, I'm going to die. I was going to hospital with ties around my head, thinking the pressure in my head, I'm going to die. I was found sitting at bus stops with the kids in the proms, just sitting crying. I was doing things that were not normal. I was like, people laugh at it, and I think, okay, I did laugh at that time, but in hindsight, I was having a breakdown and no one was even aware of it. I cut my front grass with a pair of paper scissors the whole day. Scissors you use in the classroom. The council used to leave a little bag at the bottom of my path because I used to clean the field, and people used to go, oh, she's on one. But I wasn't on one. I wasn't well. And I was heartbroken and couldn't understand this emotion I was feeling and the anxiety and the trauma. And it was then I went to the GP after months of running back and forth. He said, we think you've got PTSD. And I actually relived Stacy taking her own life. And it got to the point that I had to be put in hospital because I then became a danger to myself.
Did you go and talk to somebody then, or was it in the hospital? Or
I was just filled full of medication, to be honest. I wasn't... They said I was a high risk to myself and high risk to the community because of I had visions of my kids hanging on trees out the front. I had been ordering funeral flowers for them, and I could see my partner laying on the floor in the living room with beetles crawling around him, and my PTSD was at its highest. And then it was all the trauma as a kid all started coming back. So for them to keep me there, I was just filled full of medication. And then they said I've got bipolar. Then they said I was a manic depressive. And really, in hindsight, I was a young girl, completely traumatised and heartbroken. And no one sat me down and said, this is what we're going to do. I was just filled full of prescription drugs.
And was there no... Had you ever received a diagnosis?
Yeah. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I have obviously depression, but I hadn't got bipolar, or I never had been a manic depressive because I came away then and went private.
But, you know, like, I know these terms, but you have such a complex PTSD in the you've had your partner was executed. Your upbringing, seeing your mother, your sister, like, how is nobody at any point? I know we're still saying, oh, the 80s and 90s, but we're coming into a time now. Yeah. It's not that long ago. You know, how did nobody turn around and say, well, I'm no psychologist, but I would say there's unresolved issues, and there's going to be trauma that's coming from them.
Yeah. My psychiatrist told my husband that there was not much more he could do for me. So they put me on a drug called chlorpromazine, which is used for schizophrenia. And then they put me on a high dose of venlafaxine. And if I hadn't had that, say I was on 250 milligrams of venlafaxine, and my brain was that computerized to this tablet. If I had missed a wee quarter of that, I was pure DTing. I was that filled with that much drugs. And it was then my husband said, we need to look for help here. We need to look for another way of helping you. I was beating myself up all the time. I was punching my own face. I give all my furniture away. I give my bed away. Smash my kitchen down with a hammer one day. I give kids' clothes away. I used to make sure the two kids are bathed. My stress levels was, you couldn't explain. I was living in a manic situation, but no one was supporting me. And God rest him, my little cousin came to live with me. He sadly took his own life, and he came to live with us for a while. And I can remember him sitting there, and he was saying to my husband, help her. And I was just remember just sitting there, just punching my own face, pulling my hair and screaming and just drinking loads of vodka. And I thought, my husband said, we need help here. We need help. And we went private, and I done the 12-step program, and then I done the inner child program, and I was weaned off the chlorpromazine. I reduced the intake of the venlafaxine. I reduced the intake of the vodka. And I seen, it was then I seen me and thinking, no, I'm going to be okay. I need to keep at this. And I have continued then to do loads of programs and inner child programs. I do meditation, all different things like that.
And how long have you been clean then?
So I haven't took prescribed drugs for 8 years. I haven't been around drugs for 25.
But it's mad, just as Owen said there, you know, so many different traumatic situations that you've been in, and at no point the doctor was like, right, we need to get you to actually talk to somebody, talk this through, all these traumatic events, let's get you the help that you need. It was just like, give you the next or the next prescription that we could give you, and hopefully that'll sort it out. And that was never going to sort it. And if you hadn't have went private,
I probably would still been addicted to prescribed medication. And what I take accountability for is my 2 older children seen a lot. And it took me a long time to accept I have to take capability. It wasn't my fault what I was going through, but it also wasn't their fault. And they seen mummy that way. And they're strong girls and they've got a family with mum and dad and other siblings around them. But I do think sometimes, and I'm sorry for you having to watch mummy be that way, but it wasn't mummy's fault.
You can't view that like that, because it'll lead you up inside. You know, you weren't well, and there's a very clear reason why you weren't well. You've had a life of abuse, trauma, and you know, this is the thing. That is not your fault. If you had another illness that was a physical illness, well, then they'd be like, well, then it was that.
Yeah.
If you had a broken arm, you get a cast. We've used that analogy before. But you weren't well, and you're not dealing with them things. But it takes a very, very strong person, the bracket generation, to not show your kids that this is the norm, that you received was the norm. It takes a very, very, because it's so, we know from all the studies, from all the experience, that it's such a repetitive, you know, history repeats itself and then things. It takes 100%. A very, very strong person. So, you know, I don't think you should be as hard on yourself. You should be applauding yourself and saying, you know, I wasn't well, but I got back to you.
Yeah.
And you know, and like any one thing that you've described has been traumatic. And we and in this podcast, we haven't been as detailed in situations, you know, as we would in others, because there's a lot of things that happened.
Yeah.
And we don't want to in that too, because we're mindful we're asking you to bring up traumatic experiences, and it's this will be hard. It'll take you know, we'll check in with you after this and check in a few days, because there's a lot that's come out there. But that isn't the only experience. Your sister was suicide. You've lost other people to suicide.
Yeah. I've had permission to talk with this person as well. It's my friend Lisa. She was very good friends with me and my sister. And she stood at my sister's funeral and she said, I know why she done that. And 6 weeks to my sister took her own life, she hung herself because she was in a domestic relationship as well. And I have spoke with family and they've said I can talk about that as well. Lisa was a character as well, and again, depression, a relationship that wasn't healthy, and she took her own life. 6 weeks to my sister took hers.
But you had lost
my half brother as well. We lost Danny. I remember getting the phone call from my cousin from my dad's side, and she was just screaming down the phone. And she said, "You'll have to come home, Danny's dead." And I was like, "What?" She went, "Our Danny's dead." And I can remember just screaming. I'm like, "Why? What's happened?" And she went, "He's took his own life."
At some point, that man's going to have to say, "I've had 2 of my children take their own life." You know, there has to be a level of accountability for...
It has to be, 100%. And I've said this at the start of this podcast. My dad remarried. And when we lost Danny, I can remember my sibling, the fourth sibling down from us, we went over to the house and my dad was in the garden and me again, hugging him and saying it's okay and we'll be okay and we'll go through this. And that didn't last either. I don't know what that even was. And I always remember my fourth sibling, when we arrived at the house, her body ran into like a proper spasm. It was like she couldn't move and she was all like twisted and she was just, and we had to lie on the ground and I was just screaming. I thought she was having a fit. She was having a panic attack and it was that severe. Her body went into spasm. She couldn't move. So we ended up getting her in, getting her settled. And I remember just going into the living room and just starting looking at us in the coffin and I'm thinking, is this even fucking real? Is this even real? Am I in a dream? Is my life a dream? Is this a dream? And his wee mum was just sitting there and she went, like, my boy. And he took his own life in her house and what that woman's had to go through. And again, he's not there. My dad's not there. He's off where he lives. Someone else.
And that's another house that he's left.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then we got a phone call a few years later and it was my little sister and she said, our Paul's missing. And I said, what do you mean? And she went, everyone's out looking at him. And I said, what do you mean he's missing? Where's he gone? And she just said, it's all over the Facebook and stuff. Have you seen him? And it was then a few days into him going missing. I got the phone call to say that they found him in the Irish Sea.
Paul had come over and stayed with you. That was your cousin.
And him and my sister Stacy were like that. And he...
Did he come over to stay with you because his mental health wasn't good?
Paul was up and down with his life. And then he got to a really brilliant part of his life. He done loads for the community. He had football teams together and he was just, his life changed and obviously his troubled mind didn't. And he ended his life in the Irish Sea.
There has been so much, and we normally go detailed in each of these events, but I don't think we'll go into it in this time. What I've taken from you and what really was when we reached out and we talked about coming on here is, you have been through so much, but there's more of a message that you're now going on.
Yeah.
You have your grandson now, isn't it?
I've got a little grandson.
And your daughter, and you have a great relationship.
Yeah.
And
I've got 4 kids.
You have 4 kids now?
Yeah, so I've got me and John's daughter, and then I've got 3 other siblings, and I'm a little grandson. I'm a husband.
And, you're making it work now. You're doing a lot of talking. You'd be doing a lot of public and charity and racing. And what do you do now just to look after yourself, to check in with yourself?
I do a lot of Reiki. I do a lot of meditation. I love walking, and I speak out. I don't think anybody should be made to be silent. And I don't think that anybody should be ashamed. Anybody should be scared. And reach out to the sources, because there is sources out there to help people. Suicide's not the answer.
There is a part of you, that wee girl that was told not to say these things, that I've seen in your formative years. Now you're like, I'm going to say everything I want to say.
Yeah.
And you're just right. And I hope that people, that they won't have experienced the same life as yours.
I'm sure there's many people sitting in the same situation of the domestic violence. Probably at mine has been a rippling of a lot. But I'm sure there's people still sitting today being told to be quiet. Why? It's your voice. Speak up. Don't hold back. And never be ashamed, because I grew up to be ashamed. Not ashamed of what happened, ashamed of me, and me had to just feel embarrassed. And
the shame's a control. People push shame as a level of control in domestic, sexual abuse, physical, whatever it is. They push that shame, but there is no shame.
No.
If you're strong enough and you can speak up. There'll be somebody that cares for you. Nobody will be ashamed. And
I've got to the point now.
It's used as a control.
I've just got to the point now that if people don't like me talking, that's not my issue. And I will voice suicide. I will always voice it, because it's part of my life. I will always voice domestic violence because it's part of my life. But what I will not do is not be told to be quiet. Simple. And I've done loads of training around suicide. I had the opportunity of joining this amazing project in Liverpool, and I was trained on the assist suicide intervention training. It was then I realised how deep it is and how serious it is and how selfish it's not.
This is a stigma that we always get, and it's funny you say the assist is a very thorough training. My wife actually delivers assist.
I love the best thing I have ever done, because it made me realise how not well she was, but it also made me realise there's so many invitations from persons suicidal. It's recognising them at the right time.
We had Seamus on, and them wee subtle tells are there.
They are.
We're not trained in looking at them.
Yeah.
But people be like, it wasn't there. And Seamus only says as he done the assist training, there was a nice withdrawn from people, you know, taking care of things, doing things randomly, you know. My
sister, as an example, it was only when I done the assist training I had the opportunity to do referrals and listen to people's things. And it was when I done the assist training and they said about these invitations, and I thought, oh my God, when Stacy was planning to end her life, she had bought there was my nephew and my 2 kids at the time. That's all there was. There's about 14 of them now. And she had bought little Easter eggs and had little jewellery sitting for her, and a little present for him. She'd give away clothes. She was doing things that were not her. And I said to my mum, them little Easter eggs, she was preparing for our kids for Easter because she knew she wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Giving away things.
Mm-hmm.
Prized possessions. One of the things that I've learnt over this all is people will give away prized possessions. Yeah. So the likes of, say I have a watch, Owen's my best mate, or my siblings, here, I want you to have this watch.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a new one next week. Jeez, that's a bit strange. Mm-hmm. Not that I wouldn't do that anyway, but just wee things. Yeah. Like there was a story I heard one time, and it was actually a lady who was on one of the courses, and she was actually attending the course, and she was just sitting down as anybody else would, and she was a nurse, and they were talking about giving away prized possessions, and she actually got up and left and went home. And the guy who was delivering it actually thought to himself, all right, we maybe were talking about things that maybe struck a chord or triggered her. Mm-hmm. So that's why she left. The course was over at 4:00, and the lady walked back in, and she said to the guy who was delivering it, says, you had said something there about giving away prized possessions, and it just clicked with me. Mm-hmm. And she left, and she went home to her son. Her son had given her the guitar that he played and loved to his sister, and said that he didn't want it anymore. And she went home and she asked him, are you thinking of taking your own life? And he says, I am. Yeah. And she put him into the car and drove him straight to the class, to the guy, and they talked it through, and they were fit to talk it all through, and they were fit to go through what was going on in his head. But it's you would never, people that aren't aware of it will never see it. No. And that's the thing about, especially being on a podcast, if you can make people aware of that, it might be something that, like a woman that's going away and getting her hair, makeup, and her nails done, but she's not going anywhere at the weekend. That's another story that I heard.
Well, my sister took a chair from the living room in the hostel, and the fella that found her thought she just took a chair downstairs. She was preparing for her death. Yeah. So she took that chair into that room, and he said, I heard a bang, but thought nothing of it. So if you become aware of these signs and you become aware of these invitations, then suicide is the most preventable death if it's caught in time. Like that girl is an example of the guitar. If that fella had knocked that door and said, are you okay? I just heard a bang. God love him, he found her the next morning. But again, she had took that down and she knew what she was going to do. But some people, as you say, if you don't lose anyone to suicide, it's hard for you to actually be opened a bit till it. It's a bit, when I started being a trained assist, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe the knowledge I've now got. But it's sad as well, isn't it, that we have to...
Assist training is available here. It's a very, very... It's a complex... and you know, the problem, what happens in a lot of these too, and you would have seen this in your own journey, when you go in depth in these things, it sort of makes you look inward a wee bit first.
At yourself.
It makes you look at yourself. Like, you know, CBT, things like that. The hardest part of them is identifying things in your own personality and your own trait. But no, look, listen, I actually didn't know you'd taken that, and it is a great thing.
Yeah.
And it's something I think maybe me and Sean should look at.
Do you know what? Having the opportunity to do it, I've done loads of charity work, done loads of mountain walking, raised loads of money, done a lot for myself. When I'm doing these walks and climbing these mountains, took my little mum on one. There was the West Wellbeing in Belfast for suicide prevention. They came along, and I was done ours for the Jade Roberts Project, which is a suicide prevention centre in Liverpool. And we all combined it together. There was 45 of us. We walked up Snowdon. My mum done it. She was the last one. God love her, getting up the top. And just us all standing there, showing all these people on this mountain, holding our big banner, suicide prevention. Let's talk. Let's make people aware that don't be silent.
Belfast has an awful problem, and they haven't released it, but I'm not sure. But it's one of the most, for the densely populated area, for what it is in Europe. I'm nearly sure I seen that. But Belfast and young men, and I'm not being stereotypical because it's young women, but there's a real thing going on there at the minute, and that to me and Sean, we don't know any training, lads. We don't.
Look into it.
Now, I was laughing
really
because I haven't heard deliver training to me, so I says, who else would deliver? Because, you know, it's hard enough taking instructions
Help your wife.
of what colour clothes is going where, but I ain't taking that over 4 days. But she actually did say that you know, she was so she delivers that, but she was meeting actually last week in Downpatrick for where they get together for you have to be licensed every so many years.
Yes, yeah.
And because of COVID, that had only come round, so she was actually being redoing her to be licensed delivered. And she was like, you know, that's something you and Sean maybe should do, because with the podcast and with the thing. And I was like, I know I keep going back to it. And I was like, well, we didn't think we were going to need this.
Yeah.
We thought we were going to be sitting on acting the two idiots and having the crack. And I was like, I didn't fucking think I was going to have to start going on and think. But it actually, as we do this.
But it shows you what's out there.
Yeah.
This podcast, as you said, was made to have a bit of banter. But in hindsight, look what's coming to you. And if this podcast is going to help people and tune in and watch, I've been in the darkest point in my life. And it's took me till I'm 45 to see a bit of light. But I am seeing it very bright now. And what I do now and what we are doing as a family with Stacy's death and with my child's father's death, I celebrate the years I had with him. Where when I was in my darkest day, it was crying, in bed, drinking, on prescribed medication. It was an easier option for me. But what I do now is that I embrace them and say, they're not coming back, but let's celebrate their life. And that's what I think we should do. And even with mental health, as you know through my podcast, I've struggled from I was a young 10 years of age. I think probably had PTSD then. But I'm at a point in my life where I've survived.
Well, that's the best note, I think, because it has been one hell of a roller coaster, and to see you sitting here, having a good understanding and knowing that you still work on it. It's not something that
no.
I've clicked and fixed it. And to see that you're sitting working on it with such a positive outlook and happen, and we got to meet your daughter, and it's been great. So look, I want to thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.